And from the time the plane hit that side of that mountain the night before until the time the rescuers were able to come and get us, there was 18 hours in between. And 18 hours is a very long time to sit and think. The way I coped with that was mentally removing myself from that mountain. As I further started to drift into sadness, there was something that took hold of my spirit and took control of my body and made me realize that death was not going to be an option for me.
December 20th, 1995. An American Airlines Boeing 757 is on its approach to Cali, Colombia. It's nighttime, it's cloudy, and the pilots have made a series of mistakes they don't realize. The crew have inadvertently steered the plane off course and are flying directly into the side of a mountain. This is a textbook case of pilot error, so just how does an experienced crew make such a mistake? And what lessons have been learned from this incident? The Boeing 757 was once the most sophisticated passenger plane ever built. Nowadays the plane has started to see retirement, but in the 1990s it was state of the art, and every airline wanted one for their fleets. It's a large narrow-body airliner with capabilities for medium long-haul flights. It was equipped with brand new avionics and GPS technology. American Airlines had dozens of these planes, with many of them based out of their Latin America hub in Miami. From here, American Airlines flies to nearly every country in Latin America. Today we are going to be looking at their service to Cali, Colombia on December 20th, 1995. The plane is packed as millions of people across the Americas are traveling home or visiting family for the holidays. Nearly every seat is filled on the 757. And at just after 6:30 p.m, American Airlines Flight 965 takes to the skies 2 hours late due to heavy flow of traffic at Miami, heading south towards South America. The captain on the flight was Nicholas Tafuri, aged 57. He has over 2,000 hours in the 757, whereas First Officer Donald Williams, aged 39, has much less flying experience in total, but roughly the same amount of flying hours in the 757 as the captain. The cabin crew on the flight were all Colombian natives, who had flown the route countless times, having worked the route for previous airlines, and had opted to take the flight to spend time with families in Colombia. For most of the flight there was nothing out of the ordinary. Captain Tafuri had already flown this route before, whereas this was the first time for First Officer Williams. Flight 965's destination is Alfonso Bonilla Aragon Airport. It is situated at the end of a long valley. Inbound flights flying from the north must fly down this valley towards the airport, as tall mountains either side of the city keep it enclosed. On the evening of December 20th, 1995, the crew of Flight 965 are expectant to land from the south. They will fly down past the airport, turn around, and arrive on what was at the time runway 01. This is a normal procedure at the airport when given the correct winds. However, recently, a Colombian terrorist organization had vandalized the radar equipment in Cali, so air traffic control don't know where incoming aircraft are, and so rely on the crew of the planes to radio in their distance and report various waypoints en route to the airport. Like most commercial planes, the 757 is not only equipped with modern technology, but also older technology specifically included on occasions such as Cali, where things don't always go to plan. The crew of Flight 965 have to perform a VOR DME approach to the airport. Uncommon today as planes are guided by instrument landing systems and localizers, VOR stands for Very High Frequency Omnidirectional Range. The beacon at the airport broadcasts a signal on a specific radio frequency, and a needle or pointer on the cockpit displays simply point in the heading the signal is coming from. It only provides heading information and not altitude, meaning the crew will have to vertically control the plane on final approach visually. It's old technology, but is something even pilots today are taught to use in case of situations like this. The DME is an extension of the VOR, an update to the beacon that gives crews a precise distance to the beacon. DME stands for Distance Measuring Equipment. The Cali controller requests that Captain Tafuri tell them the distance to Cali from their current position under the Charlie Lima Oscar VOR located at Cali near the airport, and also asks Tafuri to report passing another VOR and also a fixed waypoint named Tulua or Uniform Lima Quebec VOR. However, a miscommunication between the captain and the controller had led Captain Tafuri to assume that the controller meant to fly direct to Cali from their current position and to skip the Tulua waypoint. Captain Tafuri then punches the direct CLO command into the flight management computer, and now all waypoints and instructions in the computer between 965's current position and the airport has now been erased, depicted by a straight line to the airport on the navigation display. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't be such a big problem, but air traffic control needs to know where the plane is and relies on the crew to adequately tell them when they pass the Tallua fixture. However, now that the flight plan has been erased on the FMC, the crew don't know where Tallua is. On this occasion, the controller working in Cali that night tells the crew that the winds are calm. The crew will now make their second mistake on this approach. The controller offers the crew the option for a straight-in approach to runway 19, cutting the need to circle the airport later and save some time that was lost on the previous delay. In this moment, the crew loses a lot of time to go over the paperwork and other crucial information about the approach to Cali. They just increase their workload drastically. The flight crew know that at their current position the plane is too high to make it to the runway at their current rate of descent, so they deploy the speed brakes. Speed brakes are long flaps that raise up from the wings. They create a large amount of drag that not only slows the plane but also decreases lift efficiency. This can help to increase the rate of descent. With taking a new approach onto runway 19, part of their increased workload is to study the charts for their new standard instrument arrival known as the Roseau 1. The waypoint after Tallua in their flight path is named Roseau. Roseau is also the entry point onto the Roseau 1 arrival. The crew asks air traffic control if they can go direct to Roseau and then from there go on to the Roseau 1. The controller agrees, but still asks them to report passing Tallua. However, by this point, they have already passed it. Had the captain not erased it from the computer, they would have been able to acknowledge passing the Tallua waypoint. Captain Tafuri, going off of his charts, wanted to go direct to the Roseau waypoint, then makes the biggest mistake of the night. He begins to program his flight computer to go direct to a waypoint. He presses R into the computer, and what this does is bring up a list of waypoints all beginning with the letter R. By default, the Boeing 757 flight computer is programmed to assort these search results by shortest distance from the plane first. However, the Roseau waypoint was not found in the computer's database. Captain Tafuri didn't know that. Expecting Roseau to be the first result on the page, he selects that top option. He then feeds the instruction into the flight computer to head to that waypoint. A waypoint which is not the one he wants to fly towards, Roseau, but rather a position over 200 kilometers away, more closer to the Colombian capital of Bogota than Cali. He then hits the execution button, and the plane begins to carry out this action. Flight 965 begins to bank to the left and begins to veer off course over the ridge of the valley. They have no idea what a big mistake they have just made. Still descending, with the speed brakes still extended, the crew are too busy studying charts to realize that the plane is now descending into a different valley parallel to the one that they should have been flying down. It takes the crew over a minute to realize that the plane has veered drastically off course. Confused and trying to figure out where they are, they then turn the plane back to the right, heading west to try and get back on course for Cali. Although, unbeknownst to them, there is now a towering mountain range between them and their intended flight path which they cannot see in the dark. The flight crew concede and give up on trying to report the Tallua waypoint and try flying directly to the airport at Cali. However, now that the plane has descended below the mountain tops and in the dead color of night, they cannot see the mountain that is right in front of them. When flying at night, especially over a part of the world with a sparse population, the horizon, along with any objects that aren't lit, can become virtually invisible to a pilot. The Ground Proximity Warning System, or GPWS, begins to sound in the cockpit. This sound lets the pilots know that there is steep terrain very close to the plane. In this moment, the flight crew power up the plane's engines and pull back on the control column. However, they also forget to lower the speed brakes on the wings. These speed brakes, deployed only minutes ago, are now hampering the plane's ability to climb. The plane begins to climb at a much slower rate than normal. Captain Tafuri then pushes the plane's engines to its maximum thrust to try and wrestle the plane higher, but it's too late and the 757 crashes into the side of a mountain. Survivors of the crash mention that the last sound that they could hear before the crash was the sound of the trees hitting the fuselage. There are 6 survivors of the crash. The first to escape from the fuselage was Mauricio Reyes. He is also able to pull Mercedes Ramirez Johnson from the wreckage. Mercedes, after the crash, would go on to be a motivational speaker and talk about her experiences of survival during that day she was stranded on the mountain. Gonzalo de San also survives the crash. However, he is suffering from serious injuries, having damaged 2 vertebrae, but manages to pull himself out of the wreckage upon discovering that his 6-year-old daughter Michelle has also survived. Michelle, in comparison with the other survivors, has only minor head injuries and mild hypothermia, but is otherwise unharmed and still strapped in her seat. Her brother, Gonzalo de San Jr., has also survived the crash. However, he unfortunately dies 2 days later in hospital from severe head and chest injuries. All of these passengers were seated within a few rows of each other over the wing of the plane. Structurally, this is the strongest part of the plane, as large metal beams under the seating is used to fuse the wings to the fuselage. The plane was also carrying enough fuel for just the trip to Cali, meaning there was a minimal chance of fire, and any fuel that was in the center fuel tanks would have already been used, as the 757 is programmed by default to empty the center tank first. There was also one other survivor of the crash. Stored in the cargo hold of Flight 965 was a small kennel containing an unnamed brown dog, later named Milagro, the Spanish word for miracle. The dog was discovered by rescuers completely unscathed by the crash, likely protected by their kennel. In the aftermath of the incident, investigators put this accident down to pilot error and an inadvertent controlled flight into terrain as a result of navigational errors. The event was also labeled as unsurvivable. A new terrain awareness system was developed and was equipped on all modern airplanes. This allows for a much clearer display of terrain on a pilot's navigation instruments. American Airlines filed a lawsuit against the developers of the flight management computer, Jeppesen and Honeywell, who were at fault for not having an adequate computer database that included coordinates for the Rosa waypoint. American Airlines also admits its role in the crash and continues to fly the Miami to Cali route to this day.